Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Can somebody just type into the chat and confirm that you can hear me all right? Want to make sure all the audio is working. Wonderful. Thank you, Eric. Wonderful. Wonderful. Cool. We'll get started here in just a minute or so. Did want to say, cool, I see someone added it in here. If you guys have specific questions that you want to make sure that I get to, yes, Alex, there is sound. So apparently that's on your side. But if there are questions that you want to make sure I get to, add that to the bottom left. There's a link that says ask a question. Just make sure you drop it in there and I'll pull it up and get to it here close to the end to make sure I'm covering everything that you guys want to get to. Cool. Well, I'll go ahead and get started. I want to thank you guys for joining me. I'm excited to do this. This is a conversation I've had a little bit here at some local accelerators around, okay, you have your idea, what are the next steps to take that to reality? And as I'm sure maybe you've seen with ideas that you've piloted in the past, sometimes the wrong approach is, how do I build this right now? And the right approach is, I have the idea. What's the next step? What do I do now that I have this idea? And so I'm going to go a little bit more exhaustive into the way I approach validating ideas and why that's important, and give you some of the benefits to that. And at the end, we'll have time for some questions. Pull people up on screen. So if you have a question, put it in the ask a question, and potentially I might be able to just pull you up on the video to share with everybody at once, which would be pretty cool. Yeah, I think that's just about it. At the end of this, I do have an opportunity to work with me. Just going to set that expectation up front. I made this as dense and helpful as possible. So hopefully you get a ton out of this. And if you want to take it further, great. If you don't, fine too. Just wanted to make this as useful as possible for everybody. So I will get into the presentation here. Let me focus on the presentation itself. Wonderful. Okay, so you have an idea. What are the next steps? How do you get that into the world? How do you get people using it? That's what we are here to talk about today. So a little background on me. If you're on this, it's probably because you know me a little bit. And so I won't dwell too much on the background, but I wanted to give a little bit of background to talk about why I think I'm qualified to talk about this. Right now, I bill myself as a writer and community builder. I work with entrepreneurs, artists, creatives, freelancers through Unreal Collective. And I also write a daily newsletter. But before that, in 2014, I was a member of a team. This is the three of us, a team called Tixers. It was a startup down in Cincinnati. It was a ticket marketplace. We had a little bit of a different spin on the secondary marketplace. So think about StubHub, but if you were selling a ticket instead of listing it for sale and waiting for third-party buyers to come, we would make you an offer up front as the marketplace and say, we'll buy this from you at this price. And we did pretty well with that. We went through an accelerator in Covington, Kentucky in 2014. And an accelerator, if you don't know, they give you a certain amount of money. For UpTech, it was $50,000. The program is about 3 months long. And they would say, okay, we're going to take some portion of your company. I think it was somewhere between 3 and 6% is the average. We're going to give you this money. We're going to take a part of your company. We're going to surround you with mentors, and we're going to give you a bunch of resources to try and help you take this idea to the next level. And so we did that. And after UpTech, we did the whole fundraising thing. They helped us raise some money. At the end of the day, we raised close to $400,000 to run this for about a year. And we did that. We formed some relationships in Cincinnati with Xavier University and the Cincinnati Bengals. And we started talking to a company in Florida that was interested in buying the company for the technology. This is what it looked like. Not so different from what you would expect from a ticketing marketplace. We had our recommended events. You could search for events. The pages themselves look like this. This is mostly me going down memory lane because I miss this very much. But you could buy tickets, you could search by section. We had some highs, like I was saying. We had some relationships with Xavier University and the Bengals. We had some lows. At one point, I had literally told the team that I was quitting because it was really, really hard, which is what you can expect if you're building something for the first time. But at the end of the day, that company in Florida was interested in what we were doing, and they bought our company about a year and a half in, and we worked for that company for about a year. We even got a billboard in Kentucky, which is a little bit of a humble brag on my part. So we executed, and it was a big deal. And it was because we went about things in the right way, and we talked to our users, and we figured out what we should be building. And it was still one of the hardest things I've ever done. So no matter what it is that you are making steps on, I want to set the expectation that it's going to be very difficult. What I'm here to talk to you about today is taking the necessary steps to make sure that path, which will be difficult regardless, is worth going down, and that you're going about it in the right way to make it as painless as possible. One more story, and then I'll dig in here. I've been involved with Startup Weekend locally here in Columbus and nationally since 2012. Startup Weekend is a 3-day, 54-hour event where people come together and conceptualize, validate, and build a startup company. Basically, over the course of a weekend, we bring people in on Friday night, over 100 people here locally. They're roughly in 3 different categories. You have engineers, you have designers, and you have everybody else. Marketers, teachers, lawyers, finance, anything you can think of. And we put them in a room and we give them the opportunity to pitch their ideas. And they have 60 seconds to pitch their idea. And at the end of Friday night, people vote on their favorites, and about 12 to 16 teams are formed. And over the course of the next 2 days, Saturday and Sunday, those teams work on those ideas to validate them, go out and get user feedback, build a prototype, and then create a presentation to share that with a panel of judges. We bring in mentors over those 2 days as well. But it is a process where, sort of like what I'm going to talk to you about, we want them to validate those ideas and figure out, okay, what is the minimal viable product that we can put together, and how can we quantify the business case around that? So this is my first Startup Weekend in 2012. That's me. I had less hair then, somehow, also less beard. We built an app that was called ManCard. It was this silly little app that was a little bit like Instagram. It had a feed, and you would post photos of you or your friends doing manly or unmanly things, and people could vote on that and say if they thought it was manly or unmanly. We even had corporate sponsors at one point that would run challenges with us. This was Cajon Energy Drink. They basically ran a sponsor to say, show us your manliest photo, and the person who wins this challenge gets a badge on their profile. We got into TechCrunch, which was cool, but then we gave up because it was really hard. And we also, with ManCard, didn't honestly do a ton of user feedback and validation. Now, the team fell apart for other reasons, but looking back, it was something I wish we had done more of from the outset. And that's kind of the thing with Startup Weekend. You go, and it's a ton of energy. You look at how excited and energetic everybody is. You have a ton of energy for 3 days, but at the end of the day, across all of the alumni, all of the organizers, all of the cities that exist globally, you see these are big numbers, only about 12% of teams will continue on after the weekend. So it's a small number, and that's okay, and failure is okay. But like I said, I want to help you get over that point, because in 5 years of doing Startup Weekend, I've seen hundreds and hundreds of ideas die. Lots of ideas that seem really promising and then either aren't properly validated or are gone about the wrong way, taking the first steps to becoming something, and they die. And the reality is, ideas themselves are sort of a dime a dozen. No matter what you're thinking about, there's somebody somewhere who is also thinking about the same thing and is potentially even working on that right now. At the end of the day, it's not about the idea, it's about the execution. So how can we take your idea and actually execute on it? That's what we're here to talk about. And the answer, in my opinion, and in the opinion of a lot of smart people in the startup world, is build something people want. It doesn't have to be a startup. This could be anything. It could be an album. It could be an art project. It could be a small side business. It could be a brick and mortar. It doesn't have to be a startup company. But at the end of the day, if you want your idea to be reality and you want it to be successful, you're going to have to create something that other people want. And you may have heard of Y Combinator. That's an accelerator in San Francisco, one of the most popular and well-known accelerators in the world. And this is sort of their mantra: build something people want. So how do you do that? How do you build something people want? And to me, the answer is to talk to those people, talk to your users, find out what they want, or at least find out what their problems are so that you can validate that the solution you have, your idea, is a solution to their problems, so you can know that's something that they want. And remember, this is super, super important. You are not your target user. Sometimes you may think that you fit in the demographic. You may be building something out of a specific pain point that you have, but at the end of the day, you're not going to have a successful project or business if it is just serving you and you alone, and it's only serving your needs. That may be helpful to you, and you may find some good value in it personally, but it's not going to stretch outside of that if other people don't like it, if it's not solving a problem for other people, if it's solely built for you. So to avoid that, what you need is something that is called customer development. And there are 4 steps of customer development. I'll spend a little bit of time on this slide. And I can send this, I'll send this recording out to everyone on this call. If you get to the end of the call, I'll be sure to record this and send it out so you can have this presentation. But the 4 steps of customer development: customer discovery, customer validation, customer creation, and company building. Today, we're going to focus on the first 2 because they are, I think, the most important off the bat right now and what we can cover in this amount of time. But customer discovery captures the founder's vision. Founder used kind of loosely here, the person who creates the idea, turns it into a series of hypotheses. You can ignore a business model if what you're doing is not necessarily a business, it's a project, but it creates a series of hypotheses, develops a plan to test customer reactions to test those hypotheses, and turns them into facts. So we'll break that down here in a moment. I know that's kind of a lot. Customer validation tests whether the resulting business model is repeatable and scalable. If not, return discovery and start again. And that's kind of the theme of this. If you don't make it to the next step, you go back to the beginning and start over. So let's start with customer discovery. Here are your questions. You have this idea. What is the hypothesis behind this idea? What is it that you think you are solving? What is the problem that you think you have identified? What is the need that you think people have? Can you find clarity around that and write that down and say, this is my hypothesis, this is what I believe, and that's what I'm going to test. Once you have that hypothesis, and I'll have an example here shortly, who are your target users? Who are the people that you're solving that problem for? Who are the people that are experiencing that problem? Who are the people that are going to pay for your solution or use your solution? Who are the people that are going to use your product, your idea? The people that are going to consume your project if you're talking about a project. What distinguishes those people? What is unique about those users? How can you very specifically explain who those users are and know who it is that you're targeting when you're going to get feedback from these people, or when you're going to take this product or this business and bring it to them and say, hey, I'm solving this problem for you. Are you interested in this solution? It could be their demographics. It could be, men, women, children, ages 18 to 24, 34 to 42. It could be usage patterns, people who do this type of behavior. It could be people in a certain geography, let's say Ohio or New York or San Francisco. People who are in a certain vertical, like healthcare, like energy or insurance or art. I think you get the point there. You could talk mobile versus web. You could talk expectations, pain points. Here are the specific pains they feel, the specific problems they're facing on a daily basis. And then once you decide, here are my assumed users, think about who are your highest priority users? Who are the people who are, if you could choose, the most important consumers, purchasers, customers of your product or your project? Who are they and why? Okay, and that's what you start the whole process out with, is answering these questions. Understanding, here are my assumptions, because at this point, that's all they are. They are assumptions. You think you know these things and you think you have the answers to them, but until you validate that and prove that, they are all assumptions. So here's an example. You've probably heard of Nest, product that was bought eventually by Google, but it was a smart home thermostat pretty early on. You could control your home through the Nest thermostat. Their assumption was that users will pay for smart thermostats because they save households time and money. They were saying, if we could save the end customer money, if we could save them time, they will go ahead and replace their existing thermostat system, or they will off the bat buy a smart thermostat system. Now, this is an example sheet that I can share with you guys too, that is a worksheet of how they kind of put these hypotheses into a format that they could go back and check against later. It's kind of a structure to their test. And a lot of this is actually in this amazing library. If you've heard of Google Ventures, they have a library that has blog posts around a few verticals, and one of them is around design and product management. And they have a lot of resources here in this vein. So on this worksheet, they have the headings: who do you want to talk to? What criteria will identify the people you want to talk to? And what questions will you ask to make sure that you are identifying the right people? So here they said, we want to talk to people who've used thermostats. We want to talk to iPad users. We want to talk to a range of ages 18 to 60 plus. We want to talk to a mix of men and women. And we want to talk to a mid-range of educational backgrounds. So they don't want to skew too highly educated. They don't want to skew not enough education. And then the next column, how do you define that these people that you're talking to actually fit within that criteria? Okay, people who have used thermostats, they have a thermostat at home. That's how we qualify them. Or iPad users, they have used an iPad at least 3 times in the last week. So this becomes useful when, if you're saying, okay, I want to talk to people who've had thermostats, I want to talk to iPad users. When you go out and you try to find these individuals that you can talk to and interview to validate this idea, you want to be able to ask them these questions. Do you have a thermostat at home? Have you used an iPad at least 3 times in the last week? And if the answer is yes, they become a viable candidate for you to talk to say, okay, does this make sense to the people I'm trying to serve? And if they say no, then you probably say, thanks for your time. You're not who we're looking for, because getting data from people who aren't your target users, or at least who don't fit the assumption of your target user off the bat, is not really going to help you. That's not going to give you the right answers to the questions that you're asking. It could actually lead you down the wrong path. If you think that you're serving women aged 18 to 24, and then you interview a bunch of men in their 30s, and they give you a bunch of feedback that is not what you expected, and you go that way, you might have just created a product that women aged 18 and 24 don't want at all. You got the wrong data. So equally as important sometimes is, who are the people that you don't want to interview specifically? Who are the people that if you bring in, you know they're going to give you data that you don't want? And here the example is people who already have a Nest, minors, people that are too young to maybe make those purchasing decisions or understand the difference between the two types of thermostats. The unusually technical, people who work for companies related to sales, manufacturing, development, or installation of HVAC or thermostats. So this was very specific, and this is very intentional on their part. They're saying, when we get this feedback, we want to make sure we avoid these people because they're going to give us the wrong type of data. So I'll give you another example here that is a little bit more personal to me, something that I had more experience with. About a year ago, really, I was at a company called Crosschecks here in Columbus. It's a healthcare startup. I was building a new product from the ground up. They basically told me, we want to get into the market for independent physicians. We want you to go and talk to users and figure out what product we should build to fit that market. And so for the first month of my employment, it was June of last year, I was in the car all day in a suit, going to up to 20 different offices a day, trying to talk to the office staff, the front desk, the office manager, and the doctor to get feedback and understand what their workflow, their day, their problems looked like, so that we could concept a solution, a product that would help their workflow and be worthwhile to their practice. So after literally hundreds of interviews, my hypothesis was office managers lose hours a day dealing with patient paperwork. Basically, I talked to a ton of office managers, and in asking about their problems, what I found was they all still use the paper clipboard, and they all have to take the responses to those clipboards from the patient themselves, put it into their electronic health record, which meant transcribing. Literally, I had to read the answers in pencil or pen and type it into their computer, which A, took a lot of time, and B, opened itself up for errors. If you couldn't read what the patient wrote, or if you typed it wrong, there was a lot that could get lost in that process. So my hypothesis was there was hours a day that was being lost due to the pure time in transcribing that, waiting for a patient to fill it out, getting it from the patient, typing it in, plus the hours of errors that they had to correct based on that transcription. And so my process, when I was getting feedback from these office managers, I created a Google form. I literally just created a free form that had some questions. I started with the basics. It was, address, phone number, name of the practice. And then it had a field that said, what are your top 3 problems? I also had some other hypotheses down there that I could rate on a 1 to 5 matrix, because I had some assumptions. Before I had the idea that it was just saving time with paperwork, I had assumptions of office managers have to fax information to other doctors. I forget what some of them were, but I literally just put them on a 1 to 5 matrix. And if I got information from that interaction that either confirmed that or defied that, I would rate it 1 through 5 based on the type of feedback I got. But then once I created that form, I researched Yellow Pages and Yelp for offices of who these users were. I said, okay, I know I'm going to go see private practices. Let me pull as much data for the actual addresses that I could find, because we found it was much more effective to actually go in person than call them on the phone. You may find that it's just as effective to call somebody on the phone and have a 15-minute conversation. Maybe they're easier to get a hold of. In the space I was operating, it was just impossible to cold call a doctor or an office manager and say, hey, can I have 20 minutes? The answer was always no. So I found that data, I put it in its own spreadsheet, took that out, put it into a route optimizer to say, okay, I'm gonna hit 20 offices tomorrow, give me the most efficient route going from downtown Columbus to get to all of these. And then I drove to 20 offices a day. And after every visit, I put their feedback into that Google form, which populated into its own spreadsheet. I took that spreadsheet data and I put it into Salesforce by the end of the day. And then I kind of analyzed that spreadsheet and the data in Salesforce to say, okay, which of these hypotheses are actually panning out? Where am I getting good validation that people are actually having this problem? And what things can I rule out? What things have I categorically said, okay, this isn't actually a problem? If you guys have any questions during this, by all means, feel free to type it into the chat box. How did you determine the size of a sufficient data set? I just overshot it, to be honest. I was an employee, so I had a little bit of flexibility. I was basically given the terms like, just keep doing this until you think you don't need to do this, or until we tell you differently, to be honest. And so I just talked to a ton. If I were you, I would say, okay, statistics says an N of 40 is statistically significant. The more conversations you can have, the better. But start with 10. Start with 10 and see what type of data you're getting back. See if you're getting any patterns. Then talk to another 10 and say, okay, does this continue to play out? Or if the first 10 you didn't see any patterns, maybe still go to another 10 and say, okay, can I still find any patterns with the same questions? If you're 20 people in, you're still not finding any correlations between the questions you're asking and the answers you're getting, you're probably looking in the wrong place, to be honest. But to be absolutely safe, I would say 40 plus, and obviously the more, the better. All right. So on to the next step here of customer validation. This is kind of the fun part. This is after you've determined these hypotheses and after you've determined, these are the people I want to talk to. Here's what I think their answers are. Now is the time to actually go and try to find that hard data. I kind of alluded to it the way I did it at Crosschecks, but here I want to talk about it a lot more, because the more confirmation you can get on this, the more time you can spend on this, the better off you are, because you know that you're not wasting your time, in that if you do go and start building something and spending your time actually creating an asset, you're doing it in the right way. So always start with secondary research. And I wouldn't say completely just hang your hat on this ever, but you might as well go and search and see what type of research has been done in this field already, so that you don't have to spend, well, you're still going to spend the time, but it may form your assumptions a little bit differently. It may help you to say, okay, I know based on this study and this study and this survey and this article that it seems like a lot of people are thinking this. This may inform the way that I'm asking questions, and it may inform my hypotheses. I'm going to go take that into these interviews now. And there's a lot of sources you can go to find that. Obviously, search engines. Google Scholar is really good for finding actual studies. I know it's kind of dense to do that, but if you can look into these actual research studies, skim the abstracts, look at the conclusions, go to the bibliographies where it's referencing other materials that they went to, and see what type of hard data is out there from that. That's great. Research centers like Pew, Consumer Reports, experts, whether you can reach out to them directly, that kind of becomes primary research. But if you can find a study done by an expert or an interview with an expert, find that, because they probably have dedicated a considerable amount of time actually looking into this problem, and they'll have some context that you don't necessarily have. And then you move into primary research. Primary research is you one-on-one in an interview setting, but you going out and doing this research and finding this data that you're trying to solve your hypotheses with and sort of validate this idea. And there are two major tools that I want to talk about. One is surveys, and the second is customer interviews. And I'm going to get on my soapbox a little bit here, because by default, a lot of people's instinct is to go straight to the survey and create this either extremely unwieldy and long survey that requires a lot of thought on the part of the user, and a lot of time to input manual answers. Or B, they create a survey that is so biased in leading in its questions that the data you get is not reliable. And so especially early on in the process of validating an idea, you want to really lean on customer interviews, because you get a lot more context. And the other side of that is then to make sure you're asking unbiased questions. So I'm going to get a lot more into specifically how to structure surveys and interviews. I'm going to look real quick here at the Ask a Question tab, because somebody asked something. Karen asked, what was the purpose of putting the data into Salesforce end of day? Honestly, Karen, that was just a requirement from my head of sales, my head of business development. And to be completely transparent, it was a duplicative step that I wouldn't have done necessarily, other than the company wanted complete control and ownership over the data, and they wanted everything to be in Salesforce. So my scrappy method of creating the Google form to be quick between visits to the office, while effective in doing that, was just like kind of wasted by having to put it into Salesforce by sort of an arbitrary decision. So I am not at all bitter about that. Okay, back to primary research. Surveys. What are they good for? Surveys are great for tracking changes over time, before the launch of a feature, after the feature launch, after you have had an interaction. Things like Net Promoter Scores, those are good surveys. Those are very quick data grabs that you can structure in a very effective way and get good data from. And that's good from a survey. Quantifying issues seen in user studies. Figuring out, okay, we've seen this issue. We know it's affecting a lot of people because we've done the interviews already. How can we get some quick quantifiable data from a larger number of people? Let's send the survey to get the actual quantifiable data behind it. It's also good at measuring attitudes, intents, and task success if done effectively. And honestly, I think that a lot of times doing the interviews first to make sure you're asking the right questions and then using feedback from that to create an effective survey so you can measure those things effectively in mass is the right way to go. Interviews are good for discovering underlying user motivations and needs, discovering whether people are successful using a product, and uncovering actual user behavior and habits. And these things are just much, much more necessary and important early on in the journey of creating this project or this business. Getting it off the ground and knowing that you're going in the right direction, it's just got to be interviews. So a little bit more about surveys. Good surveys are short. They keep things on a need-to-know basis. As I was saying earlier, a lot of people get really unwieldy with their surveys and they go like 20 questions deep. And you really want to keep these surveys to, this is also kind of arbitrary, but I always aim for like 8 or less questions. And I try to keep them completely quantifiable, completely, multiple choice or quick input. I don't ask for a lot of direct manual typing unless I say like, this is totally optional. Thank you for answering this. Because a lot of times having that manual entry, that text entry, just scares people off. They will open the survey and then they'll see that and they'll say, I don't have time to do this right now, I'll come back. And they never come back. Or they will enter such a short string that it's not giving you the full context that you need. So keeping it short, keeping it something that you can answer just by clicking buttons or typing in numbers, super good. Giving an expectation up front on those surveys to say, this will only take you 60 seconds to complete. This will take you 5 minutes to complete. That way, when people open it, they have the right expectation of how much time it will take, and they'll actually do it. If you don't tell them, and it turns out by looking at it, there's going to be 20 minutes, but they opened it thinking they had 10 minutes to spare, you may have lost that person forever. Good surveys start broad and get more detailed as they go down. So you may ask, do you have cable? And then if they say yes, then you say, okay, who is your cable provider? Is it Time Warner? Is it, WOW? Wow. Sorry, I've watched this Owen Wilson video recently, and every time I say wow, I think of Owen Wilson saying, wow. So they start broad and get more detailed. They group related questions together. So if you're talking about cable and you ask some questions that say, do you have cable in your household? How much time a day do you watch cable? You don't bounce around and say, do you have cable in your household? Do you go grocery shopping on Mondays? Do you have a record player? How much time do you watch cable every day? Like, they keep things segmented and bucketed. They're pre-tested. So before you go out to your group of 50 people and say, take this survey, you go to a group of 3 or 5 people and say, hey, can you give me some feedback on this? Or can you take this and let me look at your answers and make sure that I'm getting what I need on my side? And they also use rating scales. They have questions that say, how comfortable are you using a record player? And it goes from very uncomfortable to very comfortable, and lets them rate from like a 0 to 7. So you can take that data then and average it and know on average how comfortable people are. Bad surveys, as I said, are used to justify your assumptions. They're used to say, okay, here's our whole idea. Would you buy this? They lead people down a path to say yes, which isn't a natural yes, and is just used to sort of give you fake validation of what you're trying to do. Same thing with leading questions. You're asking them to really just give you the answers you want to hear, and you're wording it in such a way that they have no choice but to answer it in a way that's going to give you the data or the responses that you want, even if it isn't real. Poorly structured or double barrel questions, that's saying things like, do you have scissors or knives in your household? Like, what if I have knives and not scissors? How do I answer that? So you always want to keep them separate. And they ask why, or like I was saying, these test inputs, and they expect a thoughtful, insightful response. It's just not usually going to happen. If you ask for a lot of input from a text input perspective, you're just not going to get that. You're going to be disappointed. So here's a survey example that I've done. Every month I run a 30-day challenge with my community. And so I ask some quick questions to talk about their experience with that. At the top, you'll see this rating scale. I am happy with my performance in the 30-day challenge, rated from 1 to 5, from strongly disagree to strongly agree. In the middle, the same thing. I feel like I improved myself, strongly disagree to strongly agree. And that's really the entirety of that survey. It's just about 7 questions, and they're all worded that way. And so you get to the end here. How likely are you to recommend this to a friend? And that's just a scale of 1 to 10. So that's a survey that I say this will take you less than 2 minutes to complete. It's just, I forget how many that questions that was, maybe like 9 questions. And it's very quick. It gives me a lot of quantifiable data that I can then talk to and say, hey, did you know that on average, people rate that they will do another 30-day challenge 4.5 out of 5? Or my net promoter score being 8.5 out of 10 is a really good indicator to me that people are going to talk about that and share that organically. Okay, let's talk about interviews. This is my favorite part. Long build up to get here, but this is going to be your best friend. Ask it to be a good interviewer. Here are some tips to make sure you're making the most out of this time when you have someone right in front of you and you're about to talk to them and get this feedback that you're looking for about your idea or about their problems. So tips, get into character. I know this sounds kind of corny, but you have to get yourself mentally ready to be an interviewer. You have to say, okay, here are the goals that I have. I'm going to be positive throughout this whole interview. I'm going to be supportive. I'm going to smile. I'm going to nod and sort of non-verbally get them to continue talking. And I'm going to check my assumptions at the door. I'm not going to try and convince this person to see things my way. This is here as a full-on sort of discovery interview that I'm not trying to incept my ideas in this person. I want to just see unbiased if this person is experiencing the problems that I think that they're experiencing. Really good questions are the 5 W's and the H: who, what, when, where, why, and how. You don't want to ask yes or no questions because open-ended questions are going to give you a lot more context. If you say, do you find that you have trouble sleeping? And people say yes, that's just sort of a non-starter. If you say, tell me about your sleeping habits, or what can you tell me about your sleeping habits? Why don't you sleep longer? Those type of questions, they have to answer that in more of a stream of consciousness, free-flowing way that you get a lot more context that you may miss otherwise. And this is the type of thing, when you ask a question like that, you just miss so much when you put that into a survey, because people can speak so much faster and give you so much more information. They don't guard it, and they don't think about what they're saying as much. And they may give you some insight that you weren't expecting and you haven't heard before that completely changes the way that you're approaching your idea. So last couple of things here, don't pitch. Again, you don't want to just say, this is my idea, what do you think? You want to listen as much as you can. Silence is your friend in interviews. If you ask a good question and they start giving a response, before just jumping in to ask the next question, just wait a beat and sit there and just kind of sit in silence. People are a little uncomfortable with silence, and they will often fill that silence with more thoughts and more input and more data. And the more data you can get, the better off you're going to be. Here are the keys to what you're looking for in these interviews. You want to see patterns in the problems that these people express. If you talk to 10 people and you ask the same 3 to 5 questions, let's say, and they start giving you answers that are very aligned with one another, you start to see commonalities between how they're answering these questions or the problems that they're facing, that means that you're onto something. And it means that they have awareness of a problem, which is really, really good. Because if you're looking to solve a problem, there's basically 3 steps that people go down on a journey of buying a new solution to this problem. You want to see, are they aware of the problem? Have they already been seeking solutions to this problem? And are they upset, not satisfied with the solutions that they found to this point? The further they are down that progression, the better off you're going to be, and the more likely that you're going to be able to get somebody to use this product, this idea, because they're already looking for solutions and they're not happy with what they're finding. If you have to explain and educate somebody on why they should use this thing, it's just going to be harder, frankly. It's going to make your acquisition costs, if you're talking about like a company and a customer's perspective, it's going to be a lot harder, because you need to not only get in front of them, but you have to educate them that the problem exists in the first place. Whereas if they're actively searching, you just have to figure out, how do I get my idea in front of them in the places that they're already looking for a solution to this problem. So good interview questions. These are super important. Some of my favorite questions is literally just to open up the interview and say, what are your top 3 overall problems? And I don't even limit that down off the bat to their profession or the work that they do, even though you may say, I'm targeting this specifically at office managers. I don't say, what are your top 3 problems as an office manager? I say, tell me about your top 3 problems. And if one of them is related to being an office manager and 2 of them are related to be like a stressed wife or husband, like fine, but you know that the problem related to being an office manager is a very painful problem for them. And if they don't express any problems related to their work, and your solution is solving something in their work life, then ask them a second question to say, okay, let's talk about being an office manager. What are your top 3 problems day to day being an office manager? And just listen. Just ask that question, listen, let them talk as long as they are going to talk. Take as good of notes as you can. And each of those become data points that now you want to hear that same answer from the next 5, 10, 40 office managers that you talk to. If they say, you know, I just spend way too much time transcribing the patient paperwork into the computer, and you hear that over and over again when you ask that problem, you're really onto something. You're saying, okay, this is a problem that they all have, they're aware of it, and they're already looking for solutions. That's great. If your solution is like, the hard thing is if your product is like Snapchat and you talk to users and you say, what is your problem? Very few people are going to say, you know, I just wish my pictures would disappear in 10 seconds. There's a level of visionary products like that that you just aren't going to get the feedback you're looking for. They are absolutely the exception and not the rule. But sometimes, you know, you hit, but I wouldn't bank on that because it's just not likely. The more you can find a problem that people have and they're aware of and they're not happy with the solutions, the better off you're going to be. So what are your problems? What causes those problems? Again, restating as if it's their work. Now, what are your top 3 problems as an office manager? What causes those problems? Asking to make sure you can follow up with them, because you may hear all these problems and say, okay, I just talked to 10 office managers. They all said that paperwork's a problem. Now you can say, do you mind if I follow up with you in a couple of weeks? Because all these people who have just announced to you that they're having a problem with paperwork and you're creating a solution for them, now you have your list of beta customers, your first customers. You can come back to them in a month, 2 months and say, hey, remember that conversation we had a couple months ago? You really gave me this great idea. I've been working on this product. I'd love for you to test it out. I'd love for you to be one of the first people to try it out. Those people have already announced to you that they have that problem. They're looking for a solution. And even if you just play the sort of consistency bias, you have your foot in the door with them for them to say, oh, yes, I do remember telling you that. It would not be consistent of me to not take you up on the offer to try this out. I also like asking people about their workflow. Say, like, can you just explain to me what a typical day looks like for you? Can you just explain to me how you go about putting this patient in your system? Can you just explain to me what it looks like when you find new music? And just let them walk through the process of how they do things, because they may even just go through processes that you're not aware of that unlocks some new insight for you. I also like asking, if you could wave a magic wand and solve this problem today, if you could wave a magic wand and solve these problems today, what problems would you solve? And then let them say, I would change these 3 things. So tips for finding good interview subjects: draft a recruiting questionnaire. As I was showing you earlier, find out, okay, here are the people that I want to look for. They have these characteristics. Here are the people I don't want to interview because they have these characteristics. Understand who it is that you're trying to recruit. actually put that into a questionnaire format to say, hey, I'm doing this study, or I need to talk to this many people. If this sounds like you, fill out this quick survey telling me your name, email, phone number, age, and I'll be in contact. You can share that on Craigslist. You can share that on Facebook. You can go to conferences, events, find people that way, but just kind of shoot it out wide so you can get a good number of people that fit that demographic that you want to talk to. And then after the interviews, after you get all that data, summarize your findings. Go back across all those interviews and say, what did I learn about my assumptions? What did I find out in regards to my hypothesis? How does this change my hypothesis? How does this further define who my target user is? Just look back and say, did this change what I'm thinking? Should this be something that I continue to go and ask more people the same questions? Or has this led me in a direction to believe that my target users have changed and I actually need to talk to different people over here? Or does it mean that I think my idea has changed and I should question it this way, or I should try to validate these assumptions? Okay, real quick story about the importance of customer interviews, and it's based around Spotify, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with. When they released Discover Weekly, which is awesome, in my opinion, they had a bug right off the bat. Discover Weekly was intended to only serve up songs that the listener had never heard before. It was intended to say, based on what you've listened to, here's a whole new playlist of music that is completely new to you. And what happened was this bug that was involved in the code actually allowed songs that the user was familiar with to land on that playlist. So now it was new songs, but also songs that you've already listened to. Once the team, the engineering team, the product team identified and removed that bug so that it was truly only new songs, the level of engagement people using Discover Weekly fell like a lot. And what they found was they went and they talked to a bunch of users to understand why that engagement fell. They interviewed a bunch of users. And they found out that these users, when they listened to Discover Weekly and they heard new music, and then it played songs that they had already heard and been familiar with, the users began to trust Spotify more because it's saying, oh, well, I do like this song. Spotify must really understand me because it's giving me music that I like. And so in kind of a way that you wouldn't expect, that bug actually was good. And if they hadn't done user interviews, they wouldn't have discovered that that was actually a good feature, a good addition to the Spotify playlist. So, okay, that was a lot of information. You may be asking, how do you find your users now? And the unfortunate answer is that there is no magic solution or silver bullet for that. Once you get this data and you validate your idea and you say, okay, I think I have reasonable support to say that my people look like this, my people are this demographic, they have this problem, they're this type of person. There's no just magic way to go and get them en masse. Once you truly understand who they are, you can start finding those people. You can go to where they already are. If you find that your users are office managers, as we did, maybe you go to a conference. Maybe you find a conference for office managers or a conference in the medical industry that you know is attended by the office managers of those offices. You go talk to them there. But really, from there, it's finding out where they are, going and creating genuine relationships with them, showing that you're solving a problem and providing value, showing them, okay, this is what I'm working on. I care about you. I care about this problem. Here's what I can do for you. And then having that product on the side to say, and if you want to solve this problem or you want to go down this path, this is available to you. That's a really valuable way to go about that. But every idea is different. I can't give you a one-size-fits-all answer for how to find your users once you know exactly who they are. But once you know exactly who they are, it becomes a lot easier to start thinking creatively about, okay, I know exactly what this person looks like. Where are they hanging out already so I can go find them? And this is the part where I pitch you guys on something you can work with me on. So if you want to do that sort of looking for customers and finding out where can I find these people, I can help you do that. I can work with you. Here's what I'm offering, basically. 4 one-on-one calls with me to talk about your idea. I will give you personal feedback on this idea. I will help you find clarity around your hypotheses. I'll talk with you and say, okay, what do you think your idea is solving? Who do you think it's solving it for? I can help you design an effective customer interview template. I can help you design a customer survey template, help you plan that outreach to figure out, okay, I have these templates done. How do I go get in front of the right people and have them answer these questions? I'll help you do a deep dive on then evaluating that data that you get back from those customers or from those users. And I'll help you talk about next steps for developing that idea. Based on all the feedback you get back, what should be the next steps? And the way that looks, call number 1, feedback, one-on-one, getting clarity around your hypothesis. What is this solving? Who is it solving it for? Call 2, finalizing those interview templates, the customer interview template and the survey template, and then strategizing the outreach. How are you going to get that in front of the right people? How are you going to get the right people in to give you that data that you're looking for? Call number 3, discussing and evaluating that feedback, saying, okay, now we've got all this feedback from your survey and from your interviews. What do we learn from that? How do we move forward? Talking about how we move forward, whether that's restructuring that interview template or that survey and getting new data, whether it's saying, wow, we got a lot of really good data here. We actually know kind of how to take next steps with this idea because we validated it. Call number 4 being, okay, based on our steps from call number 3, let's do one more check-in, say, here's where we stand. Here is our progress on validating this idea. Here's what we know. Here's what we still need to know. Brainstorming solutions around those challenges based on all that feedback. Okay, we know that these people aren't seeing the problem. We know that these people are actually seeing a separate problem. We have 2 different user types. Whatever those challenges are, we talk through that and we plan the next steps now moving forward after our 4 calls together. What do you do next to say, okay, this is how I continue on now this idea is validated or invalidated. So if you want to do that, just a single payment of $200. That's for 4 calls, up to an hour each. I would say every week, and if we move that quickly, that's fine. We can do it every week. But my guess is between the actual gathering of data and customer interviews, it's going to take you more than a week to do all of that. And so it's more valuable to say, first call the first week, we'll do another call the next week. Maybe we need 2 weeks before the 3rd call to get that data. And now whatever you need before the 4th call. What is 4 calls? Up to an hour apiece. So again, laying that out, 4 calls, personal feedback from me, finding clarity on your hypotheses, designing effective customer interview templates, designing effective customer survey templates, creating that plan for getting the right people to give you the feedback, doing a deep dive on that feedback, defining your idea further from that and your target customers, and then strategizing next steps to take what you validated or what we've invalidated to move forward from there. So thank you guys for being here. I'm looking at the chat. I'm looking for the ask a questions if there are any further questions. If you're ready to move forward with me and work with me on that, I would love to do that. I think it'd be a lot of fun. It's something I've done a lot of between Startup Weekend, Crosschecks, and Tixers, and Unreal Collective, frankly. So if you want to make those next steps, go to jklaus.com/idea. I don't have a sexy landing page yet. I have basically a redirect that'll just take you to a PayPal. But if you want to take those next steps, just go through there. I'll get your email and I'll reach out and we'll set up our first call. But I'm excited. I appreciate you guys tuning in. If you have any other questions, feel free to enter them now. Getting these slides would be great, says Karen. Cool. I'll send that out to you guys. This supposedly was recording live in real time. So hopefully I can just close this out and send it to you guys. Cool. That's all I got. Would love to work with you guys. Thanks for tuning in. I have another webinar starting here in 30 minutes around taking control of your personal brand. Super proud of how that came together too. If that's interesting to you, I think it would be a great thing for you to join. But otherwise, I'll talk to you the next time, I suppose. Cool. Thanks, guys.